we host these bi-weekly. If this is your first time on our webinar, so every other Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is when we host the CSA Revolution webinar series. So again, welcome everyone. My name is Chris Tinks, Marketing Director for Compliance Group. Let's go ahead and get started. So first off, in the upper left-hand corner, I'm going to do my best to say his last name correctly. Lou Poirier. Khaled, go ahead and correct me. Lou Poirier.
It's actually Lou Poirier.
Thank you. Lou, you're the IT
Is that
Director.
correct, Lou?
That's correct, yes.
Lou, IT Director, Quality and R&D Systems at Lantheus Medical Imaging. You are an IT professional with experience in fast-paced pharmaceutical and medical device industries. You deployed CSV methodology for the likes of Boston Scientific, Covidien, and you've automated CSV in 3 different companies over the last 15 years. And you currently have a 4th underway. You're a longtime member of the FDA Industry CSA Team. So for those folks that don't know, if you look up hashtag FICSA on LinkedIn, you'll find the group and it'll actually provide you with really good relevant information around CSA. So look up hashtag FICSA and you'll find us on LinkedIn. And again, you're a instrumental contributor to the FDA Draft Guidance computer software assurance. Next up, and he'll be joining us in a little bit, is Mr. Francisco Vicente. He is the Program Manager, Case for Quality CDRH at the FDA. He's currently the Program Manager within the Office of Compliance, Center for Devices and Radiological Health, the CDRH at the FDA. His effort around the CDRH strategic priorities from 2016 and 17 will help to improve access and patient outcomes by engaging industry payers, providers, and patients to increase focus on the quality and performance of medical devices. And finally, our moderator for today's discussion, Mr. Khaled Masali, Executive Vice President for Clients and Regulatory Relations at Compliance Group, Inc. You are an executive around quality and compliance and a thought leader providing cutting-edge solutions within the life sciences industry. You are a key participant of the MDIC Case for Quality initiatives and member of the FDA Industry CSA Team, hashtag FICSA on LinkedIn. And a contributor to the FDA Draft Guidance computer software assurance for manufacturing, operations, and quality system software. So let's do a quick recap of our past webinars, and we will begin with the cultural discussion with Lou. So this is episode number 6. So let's just a quick recap on the first 5 episodes that we've hosted since the beginning of July. We started this series way back on July the 9th with Gilead Sciences, and they talked about their CSA journey that started back in 1997. We then had Johnson & Johnson on talking about their CSA journey and how they created a pilot to create an effective MES, also known as Manufacturing Execution System. On August the 6th, we had a CSA panelist discussion with Cisco Vicente at the FDA, as well as Fresenius Medical Care. Fresenius talked about their transformation from CSV to CSA and the internal cultural barriers they had to overcome to get to this point. On August the 20th, we talked with Medtronic. They talked about their CSA journey with automation by incorporating an effective validation electronic signature ALM tool called Polarian. And lastly, the previous episode on September the 3rd was with our friends at Boston Scientific. They explained how the upcoming guidance provided them with the right actionable decisions based on the huge reduction in burden with data mining and spreadsheet validation. So what's going to be covered during today's webinar with FDA and Lantheus Medical Imaging is Lou and Cisco are going to explain how to help you overcome organizational cultural barriers with CSA. This will include how you can avoid symptoms of conservative behavior, such as validation is a greater effort than the development of software, significant internal external cost of validation for software greater than 50% of your project cost, and greater than 80% of requirements evaluated as high risk. Lou's going to do a great job explaining how we can help you, or how he can help you overcome situations like that. So without further ado, Khaled Masali, I will pass the baton over to you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. And thank you, Lou, for joining. I understand how busy you are, and everyone is. Just a note, Cisco just sent me a note. He will be running a little late, so but he will be coming to support us as well. Again, for those of you who are new to the webinar series, just wanted to share with you. Usually I introduce the FDA industry team and talk about their background, and that's really the very first thing on the agenda. And then we have the infamous slide that really we put together as a FICSA team as well, alongside with the FDA. It's about cultural barriers paralyzing the industry. We're lucky to have Lou because his topic today is basically about the cultural barriers that he has seen previously when he was with Medtronic and now with Lantheus, and I'm sure with other organizations, and what he's been doing about it. I think this is going to be a really an important topic because that is the same question we get all the time. I'm not going to say what organization, what department usually pushes back, but the bottom line is this whole CSA concept is really about accepting it and changing the paradigm shift, right? And accepting the paradigm shift. And I think Lou will cover some of that as well as Cisco, and I will jump in as well. We're going to have some next steps for you, and also we'll open it toward the end, as Chris mentioned, to some questions. Really, the objective that I want folks to really focus on today is right after this, start thinking how you want to implement CSA. Okay, if you're not ready to implement it, start thinking about it and ask the question that prepare you to actually start implementing it. Digitize your current paper CSA processes. And no one better than Lou to speak to that because he's automated that in multiple companies, and I'm sure he'll share some of that those experiences. And then finally, well, not finally, but create awareness to accelerate innovation and realize the value. So really, the objective of CSA, you're doing yourself and your company a favor by accelerating innovation. And again, as we innovate, we are really focusing on saving lives and also building quality systems. And then you're going to realize the value. And the value I'm talking about from cost, from staffing, there's a lot to realize when we're talking about realizing value. This is almost like a separate session, and the saving that you will accomplish while adapting CSA. And finally, no need to wait for the FDA Draft Guidance to be released. Why am I saying that? Because that's the same question. When is it going to be released? I'm not ready to do it until it's released. Well, do not wait until it's released, and we'll know why. Just want to introduce you to the team for those of you who haven't been attending our series. The FDA Industry CSA Team, folks from medical device, pharma, biotech, came together for over 4.5 years today, alongside with the FDA. The FDA partnered with us to really come up with recommendation. A lot of these recommendations went into what we're calling today the FDA Draft Guidance. And these individuals have, one way or another, implemented CSA somehow in their organization. Did they get pushbacks? You betcha. Yes, they did. What have they done about it? A lot. But again, it's really the belief, the understanding, and what it means to our industry. Okay, so these are the individuals. Today we have Lou and Cisco with us. And again, I'm sharing the link here to join us on the FICSA LinkedIn group, as we are planning on having a lot of conversation on our group, and also sharing a lot of examples that will be coming up out of this group. The draft guidance, we cannot promise. It says, and literally if you go on the website and you click on this link, it's going to take you to the website. It's going to tell you our draft, computer software assurance for manufacturing operation and quality software. This is the guidance, okay? Just an FYI, this name has evolved. It started as non-product software, okay? The name has evolved. How did it get evolved? Internally within the FDA. Obviously, there is a belief that we should really apply CSA not only on enterprise and standalone software, right? We're talking about manufacturing, operation, quality system software. So the scope of this guidance has definitely increased. Now, when you go on this site here, it's going to tell you it might be released by the end of fiscal year 2020. Fiscal year for the FDA is the end of this month. Do I know, or does Lou know, because we're part of the team? No, we don't. Cisco may not even be able to share because it is going through an internal process review. And as you all know, draft guidance, even if they're released, there will also be draft. So the bottom line, I'm going through all the story here. Stop waiting for this draft guidance to be released. What this guidance is basically saying, it's all within the current regulation. We're not going anywhere outside of that, outside the regulation. Oops, sorry. And again, most of us on the call here, we've been following GAM 5 for over 20 plus years, right? Well, the ISBE GAM folks believe in the CSA approach, endorsed the CSA approach as a risk-based approach, that they've been discussing it and talking about it for over 20 plus years, right? So really my message to you here is, let's stop waiting for the draft guidance and do the right thing, okay? Lou, do you want to make any comment on this one here? Because I know you have
No,
a lot
I think that's right. I mean, it's when you say, hey, I'm going to wait for the guidance, really what you're saying is that, you know, I'm not taking accountability, right, for my CSV, because that's really what this group is saying, is that you own accountability, you design what works for you, and then say, am I meeting all the regulations, as opposed to, I think all the regulations say this, and this is what we're going to do. So it's about, you know, accepting accountability, both in all the groups, the business group, the IT, and quality.
Awesome, thank you. All righty, so again, what are the cultural barriers that paralyzing the industry, right? And again, this is specifically what we're really talking about for any software other than software as a medical device and software in a medical device. Now, some of the questions might come up, well, I'm in pharma and the draft guidance is, is being launched from CDRH. Well, CDRH 21 CFR Part 820 is really the benchmark of all these regulations, right? It did not have anything about computer system validation for pharma. So this is really the paradigm shift starting here. So, and I'm not gonna speak too much to that. Hopefully when Cisco joins us today, and he will speak more to it. And again, you'll hear it from the source. Okay, what I'm really going to focus here on, what's holding us back. You know, we're a risk-based. Everything is high risk. So basically today, as we develop software, as we validate software, everything is high risk. Business process is a high risk. Is it really? Again, we validate all software like product software. We've been doing this for years and years and years. You guys know it. I know it. We've been using the word validation. That means everything is scripted, rigorous testing on every single thing, whether it's out of the box or configured or customized, right? Again, just think of the cost and the time it takes you to get something out the door. Too much documentation, a lot of overhead for little values. I've heard it today from one client call where basically, well, he said that inspectors basically are just tired from reviewing documentation. And I would agree, and Cisco will probably jump in and agree with us, that they don't have time to go through all these documentation because most of the industry so far is focusing on compliance and not quality of a system. We release a system today. Yes, we have a perfect mint condition documentation, but guess what? We still end up with tons of bugs and issues in the production environment. Most deviation today are documentation errors. Okay, I will not repeat this, but you know this is what most of our deviations are. Because if we did enough work in the beginning, Why are we having too many, too many errors? But most of them are deviation errors. Any IT organization that I've worked with, it says it takes them 4 times longer for validation of a system, right? So we do have bad reputation, okay? Data mining. A customer saying, we looked at purchasing an inexpensive BI tool, but CSV cost was too high. Really? All what we're trying to do is to innovate and come up with better data analytics. Now, in order to validate this, we have to go through all this, right? The real pain no one discussed is the CSV burden over the entire life cycle. So we think validation starts with a project and it ends. Validation really never ends, right? You need to maintain it throughout the life cycle. So just imagine you're going through all that rigorous testing over and over again during the maintenance of the system. A change control may turn into a project. And again, and I know most of you are aware of these things, but we need to make that step to change, right? We need to overcome it. I just want to share with you here some of the summary of impact. Manufacturers are just reluctant to invest. They don't want to invest in it because it takes too long, right? And when they invest, documentation burden is excessive. Cybersecurity, enterprise risk increases. So what are we doing about cybersecurity here, right? Slow to upgrade and implement patches. A lot of our systems are becoming legacy, and they're not really legacy system yet, right? But becoming old because we don't want to upgrade, we don't want to move forward to newer technology or upgrade to a better technology because we're afraid of the cost of validation. So I could go on and on and on, but I definitely want to give my friend Lou here his time to really share with us his experience and what he's seen throughout the organization that he worked at. So Lou, I'm going to turn it back to you, sir.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Khaled. So conservative cultural approach, right? So, there are a lot of different ways you can kind of approach, but really what I'm going to try to speak to is kind of what's worked, what's not worked. There are no silver bullets here. So if you think about, and these mirror a lot of what Khaled just kind of went over, every requirement must be formally tested, right? I have to make my timelines, and validation slows us down. So you can see there are quality aspects, there are IT aspects or business aspects of these. Can we go live and, do the validation after? I mean, I've heard that. It's scary, but it really speaks a lot to when these things are happening, right? So if you think about the first one, every requirement must be formally tested, that's more of a stance, right? That's more of a cultural stance to say, this is what we do, this is what we've been doing forever, we're going to formally test. Whereas you look at that, that third one, can we go live and do the validation after? When's that happening? Well, that's happening about a week before go live. You have none of your documentation signed off yet. You've got to meet that deadline. That's where that question comes up, where the stress and the tension is very high. And trust me, I have burned or torched many a relationship with my QC partners or QA partners, in those moments, right? Because there's a lot of pressure from the business, from IT, from quality. Everybody wants to get the job done. It's really how that they're bumping into things, right? I'll wait until the new guidance, and obviously Khaled made a big point of that, but really that's talking about, well, I don't really want to take a leadership role within my company to how we're going to execute, right? So you have an option. You can either say, well, this is what the regulations say, this is what I've been doing for 20 years, and this is what I want to keep doing because I know it's safe and it covers me, right? But really, if you say to yourself, well, what would work best for my company? Maybe what works best for an enterprise-wide software, or maybe a niche software. What do I need to do? What makes sense for us? And then say, am I meeting the requirements? Can I defend this, right? Can I defend this structurally of what I did? Is my logic sound, right? And that's a big step. That's hard to do. It's a lot easier to say, well, if I test everything 100%, then I know I'm covered. And those are the things that kind of tend to create, what's on the next slide. And really, and I think Khaled talked about this validation, it's not improving the software quality, because many times, and I'll go through in a couple examples where it's really just pushing the paper, but we're not challenging the system, right? We're not challenging the quality. We're not doing enough negative testing. We're not leaving it open enough for people to say, this is how I do my job. What if I do this? What if I do that? Because to write that down formally is very, very burdensome. So what you have is a lot of paper happy path testing. I know this is going to work. I tested it 100 times. I'm going to write it down and test it that 101st time because I know it'll be right. These are symptoms. When I talk about symptoms, you could see in a conservative environment some of the impacts of what's happening, right? The validation is greater effort than the development. And this really happens a lot when you're trying to maintain your validated state, right? So you're doing change control. I could take a 2-minute development or code change or configuration, and it can take me 6 weeks to get it through validation because we have such an onerous change control process, right, within our CSV. And that's the type of things that if you're seeing that a lot, maybe there's an opportunity there, right? Your business partners resist software changes due to validation overhead. There's a huge risk here, or a big danger when you start seeing that. And the danger here is that really your company, your business can be missing opportunities to distinguish themselves as a leader, right? Because they're not going to go into this new cutting edge technology, or they're not going to try to put in this very lean process because their overhead for validation is just too great. And when you're looking at that and you're saying, okay, I don't have resources, we're all resource constrained. Do I want to put in, well, what I have is working, I'm muddling through, I'm getting there, so I'll just stay where I am instead of trying to really promote that idea, because that is such a burden to success, right? And then I've seen this, right? Significant internal, external costs of validation. Projects, when I do a project schedule, or I'm going to say, hey, I want to invest in this software, or I want to invest in this new process. And right at the bottom line, they say, okay, we're going to have to at least 15, 20% for validation overhead. So if you're seeing that in your capital requests, you're being conservative there, right? If you're taking a true risk-based approach and you're really leaning that out and only targeting, where you need to do the most amount of testing, then those costs are going to go significantly down. So if you're seeing capital requests coming in at 15 or 20% or more, I've seen, that's a problem. One of the other things I see is it's how you, so a lot of the solution is, well, we don't have the resources inside. So why don't we just have the vendor do the validation, right? Which is really high level costs. Could be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars for a significant project. And I can talk to that when I start talking about, LIMS and Maximo deployments. But still the vendor even can't produce it. They can maybe get you 80% there. There's still going to be a lot of internal knowledge, a lot of internal work to execute this stuff. And really, how often are you going back to your documentation? That's another clue that you're conservative. If you're writing piles and piles of documentation, whether it's electronically or actually on paper, how often are you going back to look at those? How often are you defending with that? Or do you really just have these big piles there just in case the FDA asks for them, right? Mm-hmm. That's dangerous, right? 80% of the requirements evaluated as high risk. Well, if you start evaluating on what's the business risk, what's the regulatory risk, what's the IT risk, that can quickly escalate, because clearly a requirement wouldn't be there if there wasn't a fairly high business need. So right away, a lot of these become high because, the way we decipher it. And I just did a project with Maximo. Maximo is really a work order tool, really designed around equipment, preventative maintenance type scheduling and management. Clearly a quality impact there, but you know, they 100% of our requirements were high. So but in the truth, we knew that the most of what we were using, in fact, 80% of what we were doing were coming right out of the box of the software, no changes. Then we knew that it's the integration with our other tools, like we were integrating with BPEX, we were integrating with change management. So once we started to integrate, we knew those were the highest risk areas, but we couldn't put the resources on those areas because we were doing the other 80% of out of the box and testing that formally, right? And we were doing Happy Path. So we really weren't finding a lot of actual defects. In fact, we executed probably, I don't know, 3,000 lines of steps, 3,000 steps over many. We found one downstream defect, right? And that took weeks and weeks, literally hundreds of thousands of dollars to find one downstream impact that was non-critical. You know, are we really getting benefit, right? It's tough. It's tough. It really is hard, but you have opportunities within your process to think about these, and we'll talk about that after. You know, if paper is the primary source of audit defense, that means that someone didn't really, you know, want to invest or want to, you know, even though your process may be onerous, you can actually cut a lot of that overhead out if you do a good electronic execution of it, right? It could still be pretty robust or whatever you want to call it. But if you're still pumping paper, and this came up obviously recently, what happened, right? You can go to the next slide there, Cal, and I'll talk through the DocuSign. So probably the end of 2019, we, as a company, my clinical group, I'm sorry, you can go to the next slide if you want, sorry.
Sorry.
That's all right, that's all right. So, you know, the clinical asked me, I was new supporting the clinical team, hey, we have a lot of diverse clinical trials, we have a lot of geographically challenging locations, and we really want to use DocuSign. So a lot of these documents we can just sign off, I can send them, and you know, it just makes life a lot easier, right? Because obviously the job of email, print, scan, sign, scan, email is hard, and it just takes forever. So I said, well, okay, let me talk to my quality partners, let's see what we need to do. And there was a tremendous amount of resistance around allowing this one organization, clinical, to use the DocuSign. So they asked me to run it through CSV. Can you go to other companies to see how they did it? So I really took, you know, really was butting heads, and I said, well, I'm gonna carry this torch. I'm gonna die on the hill with this one. And so I went through a lot of my partners here within this group and said, hey, how did you do it? And I got some responses, and I escalated up to the CIO, and I'm in there with the VP of quality, and we're having a discussion, and finally they acquiesce. Okay, all right, but you have to write a work order or a work instruction, and it can only be used by clinical. I said, fine, you know, so we go through all that, we get it, takes a few months, we get it, we're using it, we've got 5 or 6 people using it, and then COVID happens, right? So all of a sudden it's mid-March, we are all remote. And the VP of quality came to me and says, Lou, we need to roll out DocuSign to everybody immediately. How quickly can you do that? I said, well, we can do that in a week, right? Because it's a no-brainer. And she was all on board, and now we have literally 25, 30 people creating, you know, probably 400 or 500 documents a week, pushing through here from clinical to quality to manufacturing, lots of flow. But again, what happened, right? So, well, now there was a necessity that DocuSign now becomes a solution, because obviously email, print, scan, sign, scan, print, and email is impossible. And impossible when you're trying to do hundreds of documents, right? So that, and you know, with that, we're rolling out another tool called, you know, Please Review, which just, and I don't know, maybe everybody doesn't know what DocuSign is. I'm assuming something, but it's just an electronic signature. And we did get what they call the Part 11 version of it, and which just really reloops into your own network for authentication.
So,
But, you know, now everyone's using it, right?
so Lou, how long did it take you to validate or assure?
Sure. The first time it took about, you know, literally 3 months, because I had to do a systems impact analysis. And then, you know, you try to do requirements, but you have no control over DocuSign on its functionality. You don't control it. It's all, you're just purchasing a subscription license or a license, and you can't alter how DocuSign works. So then it really doesn't fit very well in a CSV model, right? Because your requirements are at a very high level, and you just, ideally you had to go in and say, well, how do they authenticate that it was me that signed it? And, you know, so you have to go down into all this minutia, and it's very difficult to do. So because there was such a resistance, it did take, you know, like 3 months. But once COVID happened, it literally took us a week, and we had, you know, quadrupled our usage, you know, because why? It was ready. You know, nobody needs it. Everybody bought into the idea that we need this to survive as a company, you know, or we just can't do it, right? And it came directly from, you know, the VP, senior VP of operations says, you've got to solve this problem. We can't have this.
Right.
And we're finding that, you know, I don't know with other companies, but with our company, we're seeing tremendous productivity with the work from home model, and this is a big part of it. I can talk a little bit about Maximo. So Maximo and LIMS, we're using so Maximo, like I said, is really from a quality perspective. It does a lot more for us from a facilities perspective, but it really is around preventative maintenance of our machines. And then we're also replacing a very old Thermo Fisher LIMS system with the new Lab Vantage is the name of the tool. But anyways, both of these projects were running at the same time. And I was the IT validation, I was the sponsor for one of the projects, LIMS, and I was the IT validation person for Maximo. And we took very different approaches, but it was under the same CSV. The reason is because of who I was working with, right? So one was a very conservative individual. We contracted with the company who's implementing it for a couple of $100,000 to validate, plus our internal resources were significant. So, you know, we're looking at costs around $300,000-$400,000 on a project that overall is maybe 1.2, 1.3 million. So that's significant. And LIMS, we said we are absolutely taking it out of the box, and our costs are probably less than 5% from a validation perspective. And it's not that that was the same intent for Maximo. However, we were going from a very old Maximo to a new Maximo. And there was a tendency to say, well, can't we do it like we're doing it? Do we have to rethink our process? So there was less of a ability to say, you know, let's look at our processes first and how it fits with the tool, as opposed to saying, let's make sure the tool works like our processes, right? Which are very costly. LIMS, yeah.
Lou, just a quick question. So just want to back up a little bit to DocuSign. Sure. Did you apply any of the CSA concept on DocuSign, from the unscripted, ad hoc, any of that? That's a question actually coming from. So I'd like to ask that before you move on.
Sure. So it was actually not practical. We would have, except really what was our requirements? And I can't remember. We ended up coming up with 5 requirements. The 5 requirements were around, can we ensure that the person signing is the person? Can, you know, someone else sign? Can we edit the document once it's in DocuSign? Can the document be edited? You know, we just had to do that high level stuff. So there was no point in doing a risk approach on 5 requirements, because we had so little control over what the configuration is. But I could have sat there and said, okay, when the person signs, what's that data that's coming out? And I could say, well, we want this, but the truth is I couldn't alter that. That's owned by DocuSign. They're not going to let me change their code. So we either accepted it as it is, or so there wasn't a lot, but we did do risk-based on Maximo and LIMS specifically. And we did have, Maximo, regardless of how hard we tried it, we came out at 100% of the requirements were high. So there really is no scaling there, right? Whereas LIMS, we were very much able to address more risk around, hey, they have the way they did it, they have a core installation, they have a core pharma installation, they have a specific customer installation. And all we did, none of the functionality in the initial installation or the pharma installation were really tested. We only really formally tested the configurations unique to our company, which we call what we call the LMI overlay. And then we had another significant effort around bringing in master data for our laboratory information management system, right? All our test methods and our parameter list and all of those different elements. There were actually 20 elements. And we chose, because there wasn't an easy automatic migration path from Thermo to LabVantage, that our product portfolio is small enough, we manually did it. So we used some very specific ways to ensure that the data was entered, the data was reviewed, the data was tested, and then the data was confirmed. So we actually use this 4-step approach to make sure our master data was correct, because we knew people make mistakes, but we wanted 100% correction. So that we became, because then we really were able, for LIMS, focus on what was really critical to us, making sure that master data is correct, making sure the configurations they did for us are the ones we wanted to, and less time on, does the core functionality work, right? Where Maximo, we had, I just counted them last night, 11 people fully dedicated for 2 full weeks to execute OQ testing in live web access. Talk about watching paint dry. It is painful. But we're testing thousands of steps, and I don't know how many screenshots, a lot of screenshots, right? But really we're testing a lot of functionality that was already core. We didn't, there was no value for us. So, and we couldn't really spend the time where we wanted to, is around the integrations, because we're limited with resources. So anyways, I want to step back a little bit and give you some, instead of just some horror stories, but there were really 3 places within the process that IT, the business, and QA have, right? And the scenarios I'm seeing and where you can be effective is at the beginning, when you're strategically looking at some of the validation plan, some of the requirements, and really understanding or pushing back at that strategic level of a project, instead of saying, boy, if I just agree with what they want to say, then we'll move forward. But really, that's where you want to have that discussion. So what we ended up in Maximo, we understood that it wouldn't be a requirement, or LIMS, I should say. It wouldn't be a requirement. It wouldn't be critical to the business if it was a requirement. Of course it is. They don't want half their requirements. It's a chain, right? You can't just, some of the, we can't, well, this chain link isn't important compared to the other chain links. They're all important. So basing risk on business criticality was really hard, very, very hard. Couldn't differentiate, right? Then also, what are our regulatory? They had a little more flexibility there, whether it was a facilities work order to, fix a window compared to my preventative maintenance scheduling and actions, right? So that was a little bit better, but again, a lot of those functionalities are identical, whether you're fixing a window or scheduling your maintenance. So, but really the only true differentiator was IT, or the IT, where it was either out of the box, it was either configured, or it was customized, right? Those are very easy high, low, mediums that you can address. If it's custom code, we know that's going to be a higher risk of failure, right? If it's configured, there's a little bit less, but if it's out of the box, there's a very low likelihood of failure at go live. So we were able to, really adjust it that way. It wasn't the pure form that we are, but it was really a high step forward compared to, 300,000 or 400,000 to validate Maximo, and maybe LIMS will end up being 30, 40,000. But both complexity are pretty high. These are pretty robust systems. But anyways, back to where I was saying, I kind of got off. I'm always on top of my soapbox here. But really, strategically, that's where you want to say, well, if you're saying this in the val plan that you will do, I will formally test all of my requirements, right? That's where you have to say, well, why do we want to formally test? Why can't we just ad hoc test for the stuff coming out of the box? Because we know what that is. And you have those discussions then, and that's where you can alter, because what's happening is, what I see happen is we all agree on a val plan, we all agree on our requirements, but there's often a project management push to get these deliverables done in a timely fashion. But what happens is at the time when you're actually executing testing, that's where you're having the arguments. That's where the true conflicts are happening, where, well, that's too much work. I don't have enough people. I don't have enough time. My deadline is coming. We haven't started. We've got 20% of my testing done, and I've got a week left. It's those types of things that if you get that far down into a project, now you're really compromising. That's where things like, well, how do we go live without being validated? Why? Because there's so much enormous pressure on these timelines, right? But really what you have to do is back it up a little bit and truly understand what it is you're agreeing with your quality partners. And like I said, I have torched a lot of relationships, but I do find that within my last couple of companies, partnering, having those hard discussions, really understanding strategically what we want to do, what's important to defend in an audit, what's important to the business, what's important to your IT partners, and then finding out what's the best approach to address those, right? And again, it really comes down to reasonableness, right? If you're dealing with a partner, whether they're IT, business, or QA, and you have unreasonableness, then you have an opportunity at that time to escalate. If you're escalating to, the leadership and you're, neck deep, and you're coming to them and saying, we're not going to make our deadline because we're not going to have validation done, nobody wants to be in that position. But if you're having that argument 6 months earlier saying, look, we really want to not, formally test the, and then you can have that conversation, and there could be, it's a lot more productive, right? In your partnering with your teams. I find that all of my quality partners, even the most conservative, are open if they're not asking them to do something at a critical point, right? I'm not putting pressure on them where it's not, where they have to get their job done, and all of a sudden you're asking them not to do their job. It just doesn't work that way. And then lastly, I'll take a couple of minutes. I don't know how we're doing time-wise, but MeasureLink was just an out-of-the-box tool that basically connected to a laptop in a pair of calipers. Calipers are just for measuring, and we would measure these vials 5 times. And right now they're measuring each vial. We get thousands of them in. They measure each one 5 times and write it down. So this is just a way of measuring, clicking a button, and then you're collecting all the data. And there was a real resistance to get this done. In fact, still haven't validated it because there's such a gap between the simplicity of the software and what they feel is the criticality of that measurement for accepting, containers for our products. So I won't talk too much on that. I do want to leave plenty of time for questions. I know I talked a lot in a lot of different scenarios, but I would love to hear some specific questions if you have them.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you, Lou. Cisco, thank you for joining. I know you're you're always double and triple booked, so I really appreciate your time. What we're really walking through is, the experiences that actually Lou has been through, and the validation nightmare and convincing the quality organization. So, if you can just share with us, what would you tell organizations that are reluctant to, to adapt and to adapt or embrace CSA, and how to work through the cultural barrier with their quality organization? How we can help that. I know that question has been asked to you many times, so hopefully you have an answer for us.
I think I've got the same answer I've always given, because a lot of it, even when it's me saying it, I think I still find that the organizations don't necessarily believe it. So first of all, I think that this is a great topic. I'm glad Lou got a chance to present his experience. It's the biggest struggle we've got. Talking to a lot of organizations, and if I had to give one big takeaway, really the biggest issue here is that cultural component, because one of the things that we've always stressed is that this is not a new really methodology or approach, right? It's not something that's outside the regs. Foundationally, even the regs themselves state that your approaches and what you do in there should be risk-based, right? They should be scaled and be appropriate for the level of effort. Anyone who's following ISO 13485, it says it throughout the standard that the level of effort needs to be proportionate to the risk. So I think the idea for any organization who's looking to implement this to really work through some of that cultural bias and shift is to really go back to that foundational and think about that foundational understanding, right? Point that out in the standard here. This is what we're saying. This is what they're saying. The scale needs to be proportionate to the risk. I know it's hard to find, but it is there in our preamble for the A20 regs if people don't want to believe and quickly see the standard. But, bring it back to that point. None of this work is about taking away the activities that would give you the level of confidence needed to know that the systems work. It's really about saying you can do this in a faster way, in a more efficient way, in a way that adds value, and in a way that's relevant for the technologies now, and still not lose any of the intent of what was really put in with the regulation. I know that takes time and effort in order to convince and discuss, but it's even there within the regs. It's even there in some of the original guidances. I think it's appropriate to point people to some of that and just make that case and showcase how you are still meeting and fulfilling that intent.
Thank you so much, Cisco. Lou, did you want to add anything? Well, actually, I do have a question for you. So in your organization today, I know previously with the old organization, you have implemented CSA in your processes, or you did pilot it, right? And I know you implemented Paralyzing and you automated it, and you built in CSA into it. How about now with your current organization? Are you are your SOPs? Again, we always go by procedures. Is it all CSA compliant, let's say?
Sure.
Do you have it built in? Do you have plans, et cetera?
Yeah, we absolutely have capital funding for 2020. So I was able to pilot some automation through a tool, and that was very helpful in both LIMS and Maximo projects, especially around requirements. But we really want to move it, but we need funding for that next step and to really apply that to testing and execution, right? That's really where the money is. So we have not automated it yet at this point, but I'll tell you, we wrote I think it's like 3 pages just on how to execute virtually, right? How, we had to use SharePoint, and, you have to check in and check out. You have to have, because we wanted to execute an approved PDF test case in a Word version, right? So I had to, put at the top of each document, I verified that this is equal to the PDF. I had, you know, and then I had to check it in and check it out, and we have to keep, you know, what's the track changes on. You have to keep track changes on. You have to check it in. Every user has, you know, so even that was very onerous to do, and your screenshots had to be labeled just so. So we were able to do it virtually, but in fact, we did it. We executed it virtually. It was an effort, but to do it via paper would have been impossible. Would not have been possible. Even if we were all in a room together with 5 printers, we couldn't have done it.
Well,
right?
Hopefully we don't need COVID-19 to be pressured to do these kind of things, right?
But,
the idea is,
what it is right. So really, what we're talking about is when there are opportunities for IT or the business to help quality partners, you know, become and adopt a more a way that's more specific to their needs as a company, and those opportunities like COVID, well, I don't like to think of it as an opportunity, but that's just a circumstance. But when you're looking at a capital project and you're seeing, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars set aside for validation, that's a time to have a good discussion to say, how can we bring this number down? How can we make this more poignant for us? What's really critical for us as a company in the software? Where do we want to spend our time? And how do we bring this number down? Because leadership listens when it comes to saving money. And those are opportunities you have to voice an opinion. Because when you're at the end and you're saying, well, we're going to have to go live unvalidated, nobody's liking you then, right? Nobody wins there. Nothing but losers there.
Absolutely.
So when you're seeing those symptoms like we talked about and the high cost of validation, that's when you want to address it. Why is this so high? Why is, you know, I don't know if we have industry standard. What's the industry standard? Is it 5%? Is it 10%? You know, what's the industry standard? If you're 20, how do we get that number down? And everybody's going to listen to if you can make those agreements at that point to bring that number down, right? But you got to follow through too. And you got to be accountable, right? Yeah. Sorry.
A couple of questions actually to Cisco. The usual questions, Cisco. When is the guidance will be released? And our organization are pushing back. So I know we have 4 minutes left, so if you can close on this, and please tell us what the next step. And it says fiscal year 2020, which is the end of this month.
Release are available. It is committed. There is a lot of effort there. So just to level set with regards to the COVID and all the emergency use authorizations, everything that's been going on, there is a backlog of activity and approval of these things at the FDA level, but this is one that has a lot of support and emphasis. It is committed. Their goal, we are getting it out before the end of this calendar year. Coming up, there is a slip from the original FY end of September timeframe, but we are actively pushing and working through, you know, the approval processes and everything as we speak right now. It is got enough support to move there. Now, that there's work and the natural bureaucracy of things that need to happen, but the guidance is intended to go out before the end of this year.
Awesome. And another infamous question. This guidance is basically covering, you know, the FDA enforcement. Other organizations, you know, they have global, you know, manufacturing, and they're under scrutiny from various regulatory agencies. What's your thought on that, and what's your recommendation?
Most of those global companies and the global standards that they need to follow are based off of that ISO, either 9001 or an ISO 1345 standard, which already explicitly says that you can do this. You should do this. So they should have no problems. I think we've already had companies who've been implementing approaches like this that have had either MDSAP audits or their certifications and have had no problems at all, and actually got, from what I understood, very good reviews or feedback regarding their implementation. So they're actually, in a lot of the senses, in much better shape from a global standpoint. with regards to how acceptable or how easily it will be acknowledged or understood.
Great. Thank you so much. I know we're reaching our time. We have 1 minute left. Really, the closure is basically, start thinking how you want to implement CSA. Digitize. Obviously, Lou spoke a lot about what it means to digitize your current paper processes, whether it's DocuSign or Polarian or any other tool. And please stop waiting for the guidance. Again, in October, please expect additional folks to join us. And I think I'll just wrap it up and give it back to you, Chris. Thank you, Lou. Want to thank you very much for both Lou and Cisco. I really appreciate you guys just jumping in here. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Chris?
Thank you, Sally.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Sorry we couldn't get. We had some questions that we couldn't get to. We apologize. We're at the top of the hour, so we want to be respectful of everyone's time. Again, thank you, Lou and Cisco. We look forward to seeing both of you on a future CSA webcast. Thank you for attending episode 6.